So the market's broken, and the market's been broken for a while.
But there is that point as well where at some point you've got to take ownership of the decision making, isn't there?
That for every one business that's sold, 3 are liquidated.
What sort of things would you be saying to people that make their business unsaleable?
Quasi-leaders and leaders, and you've been leader-led, you now need to be quasi-leader-led.
So you mentioned surfing before. Are you a surfer?
Yes. Yeah, wow. I would claim that I'm a corporate financier because I'm pretty good at that. Am I a surfer? There was a time in my life where I would have claimed to have been a golfer because I was a single figure handicap golfer in my teens when clubs were made of metal and wood and stuff. And I was a pretty decent golfer, and I had a realistic claim that I might be good enough to become a club pro, but not. I had some fantasies about playing, like winning the Ryder Cup, but obviously as part of a team. Yeah. But that was completely unrealistic. But I would at least say I was good enough to claim to be a golfer. I'm not sure whether I'd claim to be a surfer or a golfer now, actually, to be honest, because I'm bloody hopeless. But yeah, I've tried to surf for years, and with varying degrees of success. And I said probably highest level I got to as a wild surfer was, or a free surfer was, being able to surf a kind of about 7 foot, 6'10", 7 foot board, and drop into about 4 or 5 foot waves reasonably okay, and then kind of go a bit up and a bit down. That's probably my peak about 10 years ago, and then COVID and blah 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 stopped, and yada yada yada, got into some other sports, and then 6 months ago I discovered, I'm going to do a plug, I'm not going to do a plug for my own business, I discovered the wave in Bristol, which is unbelievable. So in April I went on a holiday to Fuerteventura, which is my chosen, sorry, I'm doing a plug for Fuerteventura, my chosen surf location, and and North Devon. And I went there. I went with my long-term surf coach, who's the guy who lives out there, and had a really good time. And then I was like, well, I might try that wave in Bristol. The static wave. Yeah. Might try that wave in Bristol. I don't know. And he's like, oh yeah, you should definitely do that. You'd get much better. No, it'd be brilliant. Yeah, because surfing's famously difficult to practice, especially when you live in Leicestershire. have a
similar problem in Shropshire, to be fair.
So I went and did that, and I spent the entire summer, with a brief period where they went bust and pre-packed themselves or something. I spent pretty much all of the summer surfing, like 3 sessions a week, 3 or 4 sessions a week. Yeah. And I'd go down on sometimes I'd go down on a Monday and stay overnight Monday night, because you do a couple of hours of surfing, and then you stay at your hotel. You can do Zooms and Google Meets. And I absolutely smashed it. So you think about that, I think I did the maths, and it was like I'd taken 1,200 4 foot, perfect 4.5 foot lefts in the summer, and I got a bit better than I used to be. I'm still not great, but got to the point where I could just routinely take these 4.5 foot waves, drop in, bottom turn up, almost cut back enough to cut back to the white water. Then I'd miss the white water, so the guy was like, hey dude, just send it. And then I wouldn't quite reconnect with the wave, but then and that'd be kind of hit and miss. But then fundamentally, if I did it, rather than trying to do a steep cut back, if I did a S turn, then I'd reconnect with the wave 100% of the time, and then power, just do the kind of power leaps up the wave and really generate some speed across the wave, and maybe even do something that closely approximates to a top turn on occasion. So the board's actually coming back down again, like we're flipping off the lip ish. And that, so I got to the stage where I'm like, oh man, this is so much better. And actually, about a week before I went to Fuerteventura in September, October, just now, they have these horrible videos that from a terrible angle that you watch. And I was looking at it, and I actually looked for the first time ever with me watching videos, I'm quite self-critical, that I was actually kind of like properly compressing and then like leaping up the wave and really generating some power and actually kind of flowing with the wave a little bit. And I was like, wow, this is great. This is amazing. I'm going to go to Fuerteventura. I went to Fuerteventura. And the best to be described is going surfing once and being like, the ocean's bullshit. So I've been completely corrupted by the fact that at the Wave, you just are in the perfect location in the lineup all of the time, and then you just get to play on these perfect waves. I went out and it wasn't great surf, to be fair. But then I'm even at a reef break, I'm like, wow, it's breaking here, it's breaking there, and then there's wind, and then there's this, and then there's a little hump of legs there, and it's just like I got 2 waves in an hour, and I'm like, usually I'm just smashing 20 waves an hour on a conveyor belt.
There's got to be a metaphor in that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Is it a metaphor of me being polluted by
by perfection?
By perfection, yeah, exactly.
Well, in case listeners are thinking they've tuned into a surfing podcast,
I'd go to the Wave at Bristol. It's really good fun, but it'll completely destroy the sea for you.
I think I used to surf at uni, and some of the guys from Swansea Uni were involved in setting up the Wave in Bristol. So
oh wow!
There's a bit of a connection there, but. I haven't surfed for ages. It's one of those things that I keep thinking about. Should I get back into?
You should definitely go down to the Wave.
And
I'd
squeeze myself into a wetsuit.
I'd wait until summer. It's about 2 degrees at the moment, I'm told.
Anyway, should we do the podcast?
Yeah.
Welcome to the SME Growth Podcast. It's myself today, and Dave Parry isn't here, but I am graced with the presence of Neil Ackroyd, who is the founder of Precision Corporate Finance and retired today.
Yep.
And we're going to be having a bit of a chat about some stuff. But before we do that, I just want to recap quickly on some of the previous episodes that we've done. So we always kind of go through, and normally we do a sort of darts finish on the episode that we're on, but I can't quite work out 147. So but be something like a treble 19, treble 20, double 15 or something.
Oh, right. Well,
anyway,
I don't know.
It was a bit of our thing. But anyway, so episode 144 we did was the final episode of our 6-box model, which is our kind of model that listeners will be familiar with, talking about how we think about go-to-market strategy and things like that. Episode 145, Dave interviewed a chap called Mike Jones on the psychology of being a business owner. So that one is one to listen to. And then also episode 146 is my burnout story by a lady called Angela Hodson, which was about her career in Bentley and other places and how she ended up burning out and what lessons she learned from that and how she's now helping other business owners. So there's a fair few episodes there. So we're up to episode 147 now.
Treble 20, treble 19, double 15.
Good one.
Yeah.
There we go.
It took all my self-will to not interrupt you to give you that.
So episode 147, and I think we came across yourself, Neil. We've had a couple of conversations, and we probably had the longest ever pre-roll chat.
That had nothing to do with business.
That had nothing to do with business. But do you want to give us a little bit of your background, just quick summary, and where you've got to today in terms of your thinking of?
In terms of business, my background is pretty vanilla, I would say. Well, I say kind of pretty vanilla. I mean, I went to Warwick Business School and did an economics and finance degree. Went to KPMG, did a ACA Chartered Accounting and qualification in Birmingham, actually.
Okay.
So, and spent a little bit of time after that. I got kind of recruited internally into the MBO team, and spent a little bit of time working for Stephen Craig doing MBOs, management buyouts. Then got recruited by a boutique firm that was called Livingston Guarantee at the time, became Livingston Partners, and now part of Rothschild, which was a market-leading specialist in selling smaller owner-managed businesses through a covert auction process. And Barry Pearson, who was the founder of that, actually pioneered that process, and great man. And so I had Barry as a mentor, spent a few years there. They sold to Tenon, if you even remember Tenon, and who grotesquely overpaid for them. And then they bought back out. And when they bought back out, I made the owner-manager leap myself and said, well, I could do the same process as you guys for smaller businesses. And they didn't want to do that. As part of their new business, they wanted to stick with the larger small deals. But they said, look, if you spin out, actually Barry was retiring at the time, so Barry became the first chairman of Precision, and then he and we our number one referrer for years afterwards was Livingston. So they were great friends of ours and are great guys, and so we started Precision. I started Precision, and then that grew pretty much exponentially until 2008.
Right.
And I was sat in a 3,000 square foot office in Milton Keynes that I just got for 5-year lease on or something. Thank God it was on longer. And it was lovely. I had a corner office with a John Lewis sofa, and it was fantastic. And then of course Lehman Brothers went bust, and we lost. I think we had something like £1 million fee pipeline post heads at the time, and all of the deals fell over, and we didn't sign another client for 18 months.
Oh wow!
So all the cash that we had, which was a decent wedge of cash. For a business that had only been going for a few years, it's a few £100,000. We just burnt it in a wheelbarrow every month. Like, it would have been more fun to just get bales of tens of thousands of pounds and burn them in a wheelbarrow. And I learned a lot of stuff from that process. I mean, that was a torturous couple of years. And what I really learned was, up until then, I think I'd just been let's say a Ponzi professional advisor with a really, with good CV and decent brain, who just had nicer designer suits every year, and was just making a bit more money every year and moving forward. I wouldn't have described myself as an owner manager, even though I'd owned a business for 5 years. And then at the end of that 2 years, I was an owner manager. And I think that's, I'm not saying you're not an owner manager unless, maybe I am saying this, but I certainly didn't feel like I didn't feel the same way about owner managers until I'd really understood the maths of, like, we've got £300,000 worth of cash and we're burning 50 grand a month, which means we're dead in 6 months if I don't pull a miracle out of my backside. Yeah. And I think most owner managers know that maths. I mean, a lot of my theories about owner manager psychology and cash flow, them being focused on cash and not risk and blah, 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 are all coloured by that. But I came out of that with a huge passion for my fellow owner managers, knowing the pain that they'd been through. And prior to that, I really hadn't known the pain that they were going through. Like I say, I'd been top university, top accounting firm, big fat salary. I maybe had a year of not earning any money while we got our first deal done. Then once we got our first deal done, we were just getting more deals done every year. But after that, that was painful, and we had to do a load of non-exec work to just keep the lights on, and which was all good learning. And then after that, ran Precision for a few years when the market came back. Did corporate finance TV for a while, and then sold Precision, the business of Precision, to a business called Opus Restructuring. Joined Opus as a partner for a couple of years, did a bit of an earn out, and then started what was Transitional Investments. It's now kind of morphed into Retire Today, and we relaunched Precision about 3 years ago.
Right. Okay.
And that's been the team. The team had all kind of left the place that we were at. We're still great friends with those guys, but they'd all kind of left and they'd gone a different direction with their corporate finance. They're doing much bigger stuff now, like much bigger ticket stuff. So the team and some of the guys in the team came back to me and said, "Oh, do you want to start this again?" And I was like, "Yeah, we still own the brand." So so we started it again, and so now we're there. Precision's been trading with a kind of year or so break for, what's that, 22, 23 years. And Retire Today has been around Transition Investment started in 2007, and it kind of morphed into this. And
one of the things that I think struck us when we first met, obviously your sort of passion for SME business owner managers, we're in that space as well. But we've seen a number of clients go through the process of trying to sell, and maybe being given valuations that weren't quite consistent with reality. One of the things that you said at the time that really stuck with me was that unless you've got £1 million EBITDA, then trade sale or private equity is kind of off the table, really, and you've got to think about other things. You're able to sort of unpack that a little bit, because I think that will be interesting to a lot of our listeners who are maybe in that situation where they think my business is maybe worth X, but it might not be.
Yeah, I think So the market's broken, and the market's been broken for a while. And I think in the last year and a half, for me, that's really, we can only have our attention on certain things, can't we? And if you like, think of our attention as a spotlight. My spotlight only really came onto the brokenness of, because the market that we were going to talk about is below what Precision would generally advise on.
Right. Okay.
Anyway. So yeah, I mean, the easy way of just saying it is that, yeah, basically I came to the conclusion that unless you're an accountant or a dentist or a lawyer or certain professional services firms where you can pick up GP and wealth managers, you can pick up GP and just plonk it into a new business.
Yeah, sort of consolidation.
So there are some exceptions, but outside of that, almost all other businesses, if you're making less than $1 million EBIT, you can't be sold. And the statistics are overwhelmingly supportive of that. Deloitte did a study a couple of years ago that I read. I skimmed because I'm not a detail man myself. The highlights that I picked out of it were that there were 37,000 businesses for sale in the UK and 3,700 had actually sold. And it's weird because I didn't find anywhere in my skimming of the report that where they actually said what the average deal value was, but they did say what the total deal value was. And being the genius accountant that I am, I managed to divide one number by another, and I got to the fact that the average deal value is £10 million.
Right.
So 3,700 deals are going on, and £10 million is the average. There aren't a lot of small deals going on.
Yeah.
Or certainly in the low millions. And that's certainly my experience. But then the more persuasive thing was, and there were a number of things that my kind of spotlight was zipping around on in this area, and they all kind of, I guess, merged together, or congealed, let's say, into a coherent thought pattern at one point last year. Was there's about 22,000 liquidations a year in the UK.
Yeah.
And about half, it's about 10-ish thousand MVLs and 10-ish thousand CVLs, and that's been pretty stable for a few years. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that if it's a credit, there's a certain amount of assets you've got to have. So these aren't just like dormant companies that have been struck off. That's a different thing. So you've got to a certain level of net assets, which I think might be about 25,000, something like that. And then you've needed to hire an insolvency practitioner, either insolvent, where you don't have enough assets to cover your liabilities or you can't meet your cash flow obligations, and the creditors have gone to the insolvency practitioner and forced you to strike the business off. Or you might have done that voluntarily as well, but or a members voluntary liquidation where you can pay all of your creditors, you just don't want to trade the business anymore, and therefore you need it to close, and you need a nice bow put around it. And my friends in insolvency do that. They make sure that HMRC are squared away. They make sure that everybody's happy, everybody's paid, all the right notices are done. So what does that mean? That means that that for every one business that's sold, 3 are liquidated solvently and 3 are liquidated insolvently. So you're putting all of that information together with a lot of lived experience, which is a phrase I know from our. I think we probably both love that phrase, but with a lot of lived experience, a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence and things I've seen, and having conversations like this with people. It's pretty obvious also that the statistics from the brokerage firms that dominate that market of the like single figure millions or below deals, they don't even claim to do more than 10% of the transactions they take on. So that again, that tracks. And a lot of those firms have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of legacy clients that have been around for a really, really long time. And transition investments, well, we kind of launched in 2016, 2017. So we spent years going around talking to those brokers and trying to get into those clients and see whether we could, because the idea of that business is that we would help businesses that had no exit. So what that got to was that there is just an epidemic of businesses being closed. And then you look at the press and you look at the economy, and Rachel Reeves about to do a budget and blah 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 blah. A big back hole, and we've got stagnant growth beyond belief, and America's outstripped us by 50% in the last 6 years or 7 years or something. We've got horrible statistics on productivity in this country. You sit there and think, well, we're flushing 10,000 owner-managed businesses down the toilet every year.
That's a lot of IP
because we can't find somebody to buy them.
Yeah.
That market's completely broken, and so what we kind of sat there and thought is, well, why? Because it's easy to blame the brokers and say that what their business model. They're not selling very many businesses, certainly as a percentage to the ones they take on, and you can argue about whether that's moral or immoral or blah 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 blah. And people tell themselves a good story, but the fact is they're just not selling that many businesses, and most businesses, way more, are getting liquidated.
And is that because businesses are overvalued that they can't sell?
No, I just think they're unsaleable.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a problem, isn't there? The analogy, the kind of Neil sketchy analogy number 1, or actually number 15. The sketchy analogy I use is that young girls go to nightclubs and they get told a lot of stuff by guys who have ulterior motives.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They come out believing that the stuff that comes out of their mouths when they're teenagers is golden because they've gone to a nightclub and some bloke with a shiny. It's probably showing our age. A shiny 1980s suit and the sleeves rolled up is like a 30-year-old's telling them that they're absolutely geniuses. And it's like, and then as their dad, you go like, maybe you shouldn't listen to guys who've got a bit of a glint in their eye. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe you just shouldn't trust what they say. And the brokers are a bit like that. I think they tell them that the businesses are worth 5 times EBIT, and then they don't sell the businesses. But there is this underlying belief in the market that businesses are worth 4 or 5 times EBIT, or even 3 times EBIT, when they're making £300,000 in profit, 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 pounds in profit, anything less than £1 million. And I think my belief now, based on quite a lot of evidence, is that that's just not true. So then they go out into this process, and I think it's something like this. And I'll tell you the experience, because Retire Today, as you know, actually only really launched in earnest over the summer with email campaigns going out to people saying, have you failed to sell your business? So the evidence that we've got off the back of what is several conversations of that is quite interesting. So my view is that people go along running their businesses and they're doing incredibly well. If you've got a £500,000 profit business, you're an absolute winner. And my hat is absolutely off to you. You're doing brilliantly well. But there's this underlying belief that business, at some point, somebody will offer them 2-3 million quid for it. And that's just not true in the vast majority of cases. So they get to the end and they go, oh, geez. And without going into the whole thing about, freedom and, owner managers are driven by freedom. They start their businesses because of freedom and then they sell their business. So they get that freedom engine reverses and then suddenly they're like, I'm desperate to get out. And then, so they go and try, but they have this belief. So they go to maybe they go to somebody like me and I say, look, I'm sorry, I don't think your business can be sold. And then they go to a broker and they're like, oh yeah, of course your business can be sold. It will be sold for 3 million quid and here, sign here and pay us this. And then they spend 2 years not selling it. And then they go through the 7 stages of grief because they kind of realize their business isn't for sale. So they go anger, they blame the broker, they get cross at the world, they get cross at God, and then they're bargaining, and then they get to acceptance, and at acceptance they liquidate the business, and that's clearly happening. So what Retire Today have done over the last few months, and when we've had a lot of conversations like this, and it kind of surprised me because I expected trying to talk to people who are there, I expected to get a negative reaction. I expected to be told, because the concept of Retire Today is we'll take the business forward as a don't do an MVL. We'll give you, equivalent to an MVL amount of money for a much simpler thing, and there'll be a chance the business survives. So we're here to protect your legacy, but that sounds a lot like trying to buy a business very cheaply. but actually bearing in mind these businesses are going to be closed. And actually what we're doing is trying to save businesses. And it's a lot of work. Like this isn't the easy road. The easy road for me would have been join, Gresham or, kind of like YFM. One of my best mates runs YFM. Join YFM and be Jamie. Jamie's way richer than I am. Actually, I don't know his personal finance. He might have a gambling habit. He doesn't seem to have. I expected it to be kind of relatively negative reaction. And what we've got is an incredibly positive reaction. And what it reminds me of, the analogy that I say is, it reminds me of the scene in Band of Brothers where they're liberating Dutch villages in their tanks and they're rolling through and the people are celebrating on the streets. And we're having these calls with people where we're saying, look, exactly what I've said here, the market's broken, blah, 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 blah. Nobody wants to sell the business. And these people who've got businesses that are sometimes turning over millions and making hundreds of thousands of pounds in profit are sat there saying, you're absolutely right. Yeah. And then they're going to third-party investor angel shareholders and saying, these guys will take the business over and it means I don't have to shut it. And the investor angels are going like, yeah, fine. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
And that all of that amazes me. And we're getting almost no negative responses. In fact, the most difficult thing about it is where we talk to people whose businesses are just unsavable. Yeah. And I'm sat there going, like, you look like you're in hell. Yeah. Like, honestly, like, you just need to close this thing. Like, people who are we spoke to somebody the other day who was turning over £2 million and the business was breaking even on a good day, 40 staff, and they're paying themselves a salary of 36 grand. And my partner Jamie came off the call, was like we just, it was all love and it was all empathy, and Jamie was just like, geez, shut that business and get a job at McDonald's. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Be a shift manager at McDonald's. It'd be so much easier. So yeah, I mean that kind of completed, like, that is the problem, and these businesses are there, and there's a hole, and what to be done about that? Well,
if someone's listening to this and thinking, actually, that might be me, what sort of things would you be saying to people that make their business unsaleable? What should people be looking for? Because presumably, if people can identify this earlier in the process, you can mitigate potentially going forward. So what would be the things that you would say to people, right, these are the things that will make your business unsaleable?
I think the biggest challenge that businesses have is, like I say, is scale. I mean, it's just maths, right? Because, I think the fruit of the poisonous tree. What is the poisonous tree here? Now, there are two things in my mind. You say we spent like an hour and a half chatting about the world, politics, religion, and God and things. I'm fascinated with how things work, right? So I believe that owner-managers are defined by basically two defining character traits. One is a near pathological need for freedom. Yeah. They don't like being told what not to do. So a bit like me, I went to the guys at Livingston. I think we can do these deals, smaller deals, and make money. And they're like, nah. And I was like, I think we can do it. Nah. Okay, look, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. And that was a crazy risk. I was on a pretty fat salary, pretty decent bonus, team I liked. And I went out and didn't earn anything for a year and had a couple of tiny kids and blah, blah, blah. It was like, it was not a very sensible decision. Yeah. Most owner managers, it isn't a very sensible decision. So it's that pathological need for freedom that really drives them. And then on the other side, as they come out, that freedom engine reverses and they're like, well, this business isn't giving me freedom anymore. And there's reasons for that. And if you want to put a link to the quiz that we do on the in the description or whatever, then there's a quiz that will ask you questions and then say there are 4 categories of where you lose your freedom, which is essentially what I ask clients in pitches. Like, if you hit these, then you want to sell. If you don't, then you don't. If your freedom's still inside your business, you should keep your business. So that's thing one. The second one is, I believe that you could look at the world through a prism of how comfortable people are making a decision, and it broadly goes into 3 camps. So let's say, for the sake of argument, almost nobody likes making decisions, or is so uncomfortable with them it's like putting their hand in boiling water. They just don't like it. They don't even like buying which new fridge am I going to get, they just don't like it. They don't like they don't like the responsibility. They don't like being potentially criticised. They don't like the risk. Most people don't like risk. Some of that manifests in the fact they just don't want to make decisions. So what you end up with is the vast majority of the population are followers, right? And God bless them. Right? And God bless them. There's a very, very small percentage that are freaks, and they are people who just don't care. It's not that they like making decisions particularly, because I don't think anybody really does as such, but they just don't care. It doesn't make any difference. These people all successful owner managers that I've met are in that group. So if you get the Venn diagram of like the pathological need for freedom coupled with the having the not caring about making decisions gene, and it is that. It's just like, it's not that there's no spectrum, right? Everybody doesn't like making decisions, and it's like here. So you get to maybe 10% comfortable with it, and then it's like, oh, there's these freaks who just don't care. Like, it's like, fine, I'll just make the decision. And so that's an owner manager. That's almost all owner managers that you'd meet. The entire corporate world and the private equity world feeds off the back of that can be viewed as a machine of taking what I'd say are followers and not trying to turn them into leaders, because you can't do that, because I think that's genetic. They're trying to turn them into what I call quasi-leaders, or quasi-leaders if we're going to be English. I've been watching too many American podcasts. So quasi-leaders, and what does that look like? Well, a quasi-leader is somebody who, and none of this, by the way, has any correlation with effectiveness or competence. So you could need freedom, and comfortable making decisions, be an absolute moron, incompetent, fool, and you wouldn't be a successful owner manager. You probably try and be an owner manager, but you probably wouldn't succeed. What the corporates are trying to do with all of their massive amounts of training and all of their focus on culture, which I'm a big fan of, obviously. Focus on culture, focus on structures, focus on procedures, hierarchical boss structures, mentoring, all of that stuff is trying to turn people into what I call quasi-leaders, which are people who still don't want to make a decision, but will make a decision or know how to make a decision within a framework of a culture or a process manual or a boss, or so the conversation would go, let's say you were my boss and we worked in a corporate. I come in and say, hey, I don't want to make a decision, and you'd be like, well, I don't want to make a decision either. So it's like, then, well, let's look at the procedures manual and let's look at the thing, and actually tell me to go away and look at the procedures manual and the thing, and then somewhere in a magic ether between us and the book, the decision would be made, and it would probably be a good decision. But they're trying to develop these quasi-leaders. Now the thing is, for a business above a certain size, you need to be run by quasi-leaders, because you need decisions made at all levels. And the problem with the owner managers is that there aren't enough of those people who are competent, and also they're willful. So they're probably not going to stick necessarily to the culture. They need to set their own culture. So it's like herding cats, trying to get them in a corporate. So what you need for a larger company is you need these quasi-leaders. The private equity industry is entirely focused on trying to take those competent quasi-leaders and get them to take some risk, and get them to take businesses forward, potentially from owner managers and potentially ones that just don't fit in corporates, and then use the skills and the high competence and of the quasi-leaders to do that. So that's a very long build up to the question. I haven't forgotten. I'm going to do a Donald Trump and what they described the swerve. It was like the swerve back to the point. Right. So the point, your question was, why are their businesses not saleable? And I'm like, because they haven't managed to transition from leadership led to quasi-leader led.
Right. Okay.
And that is ultimately the nexus of the entire challenge. So what ultimately is the answer? Well, there might not be an answer. The answer might be tough it out, grow big enough that somebody will buy you. Because the other failing that owner managers have, and you will have seen this, like, is that for every owner manager who manages to put a manager in and empower that manager to run the business, there's 20 who either didn't hired somebody incompetent, but more likely hired somebody competent, didn't empower them, and then they became a yes man. But what's the real problem? And I used to I've just used old rhetoric, out of date Neil rhetoric. So what I used to say was, as an owner manager, you'd hire a competent, let's say you hire a competent quasi-leader, and then you either micromanage him to the point where he either leaves or becomes a yes man, and either way it was a complete exercise in futility, and you're still running your business and it's no more saleable. And that comes from like an old understanding of maybe that owner managers are a little bit controlling, which some of them are, but that's not the thing. The thing is, I think that the quasi-leader comes in, and inside that quasi-leader, there's still somebody who doesn't want to make any decisions. So they walk into the building and they realise, Richard's in the corner office. If I go into Richard's office and present him with a problem that I don't want to come up with the answer to, then Richard will make the decision for me. And once they realise that that's on offer,
just boomerangs back every time.
They'll just be like, I don't have to make any decisions anymore. I still get paid. And they just forget all of that unnatural well, they don't forget all of it, but they're like, this is awesome. Like I never wanted to make decisions anyway, because if they wanted to make decisions, they would have started their own business, because people who are like owner managers, the freedom and the decision making thing, they drive people out of corporates.
So it's the scale and the structure then you're saying is kind of the two of the things.
And the inability to so it's all about that transition from leader to quasi-leader, and what you end up with. This is why as businesses get bigger, that a lot of owner managers just end up working 100-hour weeks, because they've got all these decisions to make, and nobody else is wanting to make the decisions. I really used to think, and I think the natural narrative in the world, the understanding in the world, the kind of received wisdom is that owner managers are controlling. I don't think that's it. I think that they just are comfortable making decisions, and everybody comes to them.
They're just a backstop.
And I think that's true of me as well. Because I'm a leader in my businesses, and I'm a leader in my family, and people just come to me. But actually, my wife, I hope my sons won't listen to this. Neve, my youngest son has, my oldest son has just started his own business. He's doing fantastically well. He's a fantastic young man. So this is in no way negative to him, but he phoned me up the other day, and he phones me up once, twice a day, and I love him to bits, and I love talking to him. And I put the phone down, and Neve mocked him. This is my wife. She loves him as well, by the way. She mocked him by saying, "Your sons phone you up to ask you whether she goes to the toilet or not." Hey Dad, do you think I should do number 1 or number 2? And it's just like, yeah, I do get that. But I think that's the thing. It's like you get somebody, and Daniel wants to make decisions. He's an owner manager now, so he's starting to run his own business. Albeit it's a one-man band, and it's only been going for a few months, doing phenomenally well. But he's still got chairman dad, literally chairman dad, going, I can just ask Dad. But I think it'll transition for him because he's still very young. Once he gets the experience, he'll be like elbowing me out.
And I think
there's
some wisdom, isn't there, in having that kind of bigger council of advisors that you can draw off. But there is that point as well where at some point you've got to take ownership of the decision making, isn't there? Yeah,
well, I think the thing with Daniel and Neve was she loves him very much, and she's playful, which is nice. But I think that he doesn't have the experience. So he'll phone up and he'll ask me like, what do you think I should do to make my clients remember me? And he's dealing with estate agents, and I said, well, it's October, so you should print some diaries and get the diaries sent out and have your number on the front of the diaries and make them like kind of nice leather bound diaries, and it'll cost you a few £100, but they'll be on the desk. If you get them out in November, then there's a really good chance they'll be on the desk, or calendar, little calendar desktop things. And that's stuff that anybody who's been in business would be able to come out. That's not like revolutionary genius, but it's something that a 24-year-old who's only graduated from uni last year doesn't know. And he's like, oh God, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's really good. I was like, yeah. So we still a bit of that phoning up, but I think the point is with owner managers is that because they will make decisions, people phone them up and ask them to make decisions, and they end up with too many direct reports, and they end up taking too much responsibility off those direct reports, and that in itself just means that the business is just structured wrong, because that continuity of business is all about that shift from leader. If you look at it through the prism of like quasi-leaders and leaders, and you've been leader-led, you now need to be quasi-leader-led. You've been leader-led, you need to be quasi-leader-led. And you think about all of the kind of fruits of that poisonous tree. It's not poisonous, but you know what I mean. Like that fruits of that tree of the being leader-led, which is phenomenal for innovation. It's phenomenal for fast growth. It's phenomenal for being reactive to clients, for all the things that owner managers are. And remember that the owner manager is the backbone of this culture. But if we want those jobs and we want those businesses to survive, we want our economy to grow, then we've got to manage that transition from quasi-leader to from leader to quasi-leader. And the problem is that we're only really geared up to do it if a business gets to 1.5 million, 2 million EBIT, and then it'll either go into a corporate, and a corporate will put a quasi-leader on top, and they'll put their culture around it, and it'll take a hit, and it'll blah, blah, blah. It might go backwards before it goes forwards. But and private equity, there's a couple of credible funds. Coniston Capital's kind of one that will look at deals below £1 million, but again, they will take deals less than 1 million EBIT, but only if they've got a good management. Yeah, which is kind of thin air, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You've got to get decent management for private equity. You've got to get decent management, and you've probably got to get to 1.5 million EBIT. And 1.5 million EBIT is not a lot of the percentage of the businesses. But then you sit there and go, well. I mean, one of the things to try and solve this problem is, one of the things that's fascinating for us is we keep seeing the vast majority of businesses we see are 300, 400,000 profit businesses that have got, less than a dozen employees. And you sit there, so there's no way anybody's going to buy that. Yeah. There's no way anybody's going to buy it. There's no way that, regardless of what a broker says, there's no way, again, exception of dentist. Right? Yeah. But then you sit there and say, well, and one of my friends, a guy called Tom Phipps, who what was his? I've forgotten his name. Anyway, he was ex-Livingston, and him and another mate started a private equity venture. I forget the name of, but he said I took him a deal a while ago, and he said, I'd love to buy this business, but I can't figure a way of buying. He said, I'd love to own this business, but I can't figure a way of buying it. And I thought that was really a really good way of putting it. So shout out to Tom. I think that that's a really interesting way of looking at it. So if you've got a business that has no management, we looked at one that was doing freight forwarding, which is classic, isn't it? It's like it's doing freight forwarding, so it's got some staff, it's got some people processing orders, it's got some connections with people who want their freight forwarded, and it's got some connections of people who do the freight forwarding. But it's basically an office with a few people in it. But it's making £300,000 or £400,000 a year. Nobody's going to buy that. But if somebody gave it to you, you'd figure out a way to make it work. And then you've got a load of people coming out of business schools and corporates who aren't quite. It takes a special kind of individual to take a business from scratch, from nothing to something. That's really hard, and that's a certain skill set. But there's lots of people who can take businesses from something, in terms of maybe even as leaders, from something to something a lot better. And so you take, for example, that freight forwarding business. What we came up with was this Protégé model at Retire Today, where what we do is we sit there and say, well, look, you essentially give, but there'll be some hurt money. So maybe a couple of few tens of thousands of pounds. payment, but you give the protégé, we bring in what we call a protégé. So this is a credible quasi-leader that's got good track record, good, looks good, we've got good references, everything. You bring them in, or we bring them in, you essentially sell them for a nominal price, 50% of the business.
Yeah.
And then you spend a couple of months getting them up to speed, and then you step back and just go like, right, you go now. And you give them an option. Let's say it's that same business. You give them an option to buy the other 50% of the business from you for £1 million. So if they make it really successful, they'll pay you £1 million. If not, and if it goes bust and they fall flat on their face, it's their problem to shut the business now.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And given that you're just going to shut the business anyway, and we're very honest about this. I think this is one of the things, we're very honest. So we're not sending out emails going, we're going to compete with trade and we're going to give you a price. We're sitting there saying, if you can't sell your business, if you're going to MVL it, come and talk to us first.
Yeah.
So we're sat there saying, well, you're going to MVL it anyway. We'll put in a protégé. They'll maybe manage that transition. So we're essentially saying we'll put them on second base in a baseball analogy. We'll put them on second base rather than them having to start from home from batting. And now they've just got to run it round. And if they run it round, there's 3 outcomes, aren't there? The business goes bust, in which case you're no worse off, but you don't have to do the MVL, which is nice.
Yeah.
The business bumbles along at about the same 300-400 grand, in which case the protégé makes 150-200 grand a year, and you get 150-200 grand a year of dividends, which is pretty sweet, actually, given that you were going to close it. Or it grows, gets to $1 million plus EBIT, and maybe they sell it, maybe they don't, maybe they keep it, but it becomes something better. Your legacy is carried forward by another generation, and then you get £1 million.
Yeah.
So none of those. They're all 3 better, and they're all 3 better for the economy. But again, we're very honest about saying there is no guarantee here.
Yeah.
Which is why you've got to be. One of the things that's really interesting, we're sending out all these emails saying, like, can you sell your business? Sell your business. Have you failed to sell your business? We have a 5% unsubscribe rate, which is 10%. Is 10 times higher than the market. Yeah. And when Jamie and I saw this, when we first started sending these emails out a few months ago, we were like, that's really interesting, isn't it? And what we came up with was that, you remember the process I talked you through, where it's like, they go into brokers and the brokers waste their time, and then they get to the stages of grief. The people who, because unsubscribing is an effort, which is it's 10 times more than normal, so that it's obviously angered them because they're at anger, denial, early stages of that process. And then when people are actually going, actually, no, this is true, they're at acceptance, and then they're like, I don't have a better solution. And that's why I say on these, and it constantly amazes me. I have these calls like a few times a week now, and people are just like, they're behaving like the people liberated in Holland from Nazi Germany. They're like, it's so good to have this as an option. Like, we're not necessarily definitely going to do it, but it's
well, I think it's interesting. Just probably need to wrap it up, but to say there'll be a lot of people who listen to this who are probably in that 300 to 400, 500,000 EBIT, who may be thinking that their business is worth more than what you're saying, kind of mathematically it ain't going to be. So I think hopefully people listening are thinking, okay, that's a bit of a reality check, but also, you may have time to still do something about that. 100%. Systems, scale, structure, all of that type of thing. But if you're not in that situation, what you sort of presented here is there's an alternative. Yeah.
Well, that's so. Here's the thing: is I'm really passionate about the truth, as we talked about, and I think that the truth, the truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off, right?
Yeah.
So there's the owner manager journey. There's like, I need freedom. I'm frustrated in the job I've got, so I start a business, and then I'm having great fun because I've got all of the freedom in the world. I don't have any money. I've got money and freedom. This is amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. And then you're like, for whatever reason, I don't want to be in the business. And you say you can put a link to the quiz, and they can people can investigate
Yep,
themselves.
we can do
And they'll go, I don't really want to be there. And then they get to the point where it's like, actually, my freedom's definitely outside of my business. I need to sell, right? And if you get to that point and you're at 500 grand in profit and you're not in one of the special sectors, then yeah, you're probably gonna have a tough time. But if you're in one of the earlier stages, just don't. The thing that I'm quite passionate about is like I love people. I love the idea of people listening to this when they're 10 years away from selling their business.
Yeah.
And so somebody once said to me, like, what's your number one thing in life that you'd like to achieve? And I was like, I'd like to be a signpost person. And the best people that I've met in my life have been signpost people. And what I mean by a signpost person is somebody that somebody listens to at some point in their life and in some time in their career, and just through that conversation or that brief relationship or whatever, or maybe long-term relationship, they go, that person was a signpost on the road that changed the direction of my life for the better. And that's what this conversation could be. If you're complacent, and you're sat there going, if your listeners are complacent, they're sat there saying, I can just bumble along at £500,000 of profit and at some point somebody will get me to $1 million. I'm not saying that definitely won't happen. What I'm saying is,
odds are it's not.
Yeah, this is a lottery ticket. This isn't betting on black or red in Vegas. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I wouldn't advise you to bet on black or red with your entire retirement either. But that isn't this. This is more of a lottery ticket. So yeah, you've absolutely got time. Like, go and talk to some, go and talk to you guys or whoever. Yeah. Like, go and talk to your accountant, get some growth advice, and also, realize that it's our own shortcomings that hold us back. It's like this, like the whole debate, without opening the can of worms that we were talking about before. Like, we were talking about politics, and we have very, very similar politics. But it's like this thing. It's like we live in a world of victim Olympics and all sorts of nonsense. I'm a very, very staunch libertarian. And I just sit there and I go, nah, it's all us. It's all me. It's all me holding me back. There's only one person holding me back, and that's me. And if I realise that my superpowers, the things that are making me successful, are probably really closely related to the things that are really undermining me, then I'm going to get somewhere. And so as they say, the two things that I think somebody could get from this podcast is, it's not true what I believe. I have a false belief that I think I'm going to be able to sell my business unless I grow it. Yeah. And also the second thing is that the things that make me a really effective owner manager are stopping my business growing, and it's largely around how easily I make decision making. I need to go against my instincts and stop answering the question when stop making decisions for people. Put up a poster in your office saying, don't make any decisions today. Yeah. Make advice, other people make decisions. Have to be made. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't make any decisions as a business. Don't make a decision today to not make any decisions, and make that cultural in your business, and your business will start to grow. Realize that the person that's in the way of the growth of your business is probably you, and it's you from a well-meaning thing, and it's also you exhibiting the very strength that made you successful. Yeah. And if people could take those two things out of this, then I'd care way more. I'd be way happier if 100 people went away and became successful than 100 people came and did retire today deals. Yeah. Like, way more, way happier. So yeah, I think that'd be really nice.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate your time, Neil. I think there's some very interesting things for people to think about and take away from this, and hopefully action. And as you say, from your point of view, you're almost happier if they don't contact you, in one sense.
Well, they can contact me for a nice chat, as you know, from like an hour and a half.
Well, that'd be a long chat.
I don't know about a podcast a while ago. I've got another podcast that I've been invited on, and they did the precursor podcast where they got one of the minions to phone me up and be like, oh, well, this guy's really busy and lots of people they like, it was Ben. No, it's Ben who sorted it out, obviously. Yeah. So Ben got me on the list, and I was like, I certainly didn't come to you, but Ben's brilliant at this stuff. So Ben got so I was having this kind of vetting conversation. He said, what? And about I don't know, 20 minutes into what was supposed to be a 5-minute call, he was like, you know what, Neil, one of the main goals, or the two goals I have from these calls are, will this person have enough to say? Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I've definitely answered that.
Excellent. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the SME Growth Podcast. As we say every week, please like, subscribe, tell your friends, wherever you talk about business. And once again, thank you for listening and good luck with your business.